乏希望。
再难也要留住他们。
我们注视到你逆风向前的勇气，我们聆听到您追求卓越的心声。
拥护党的纲领，
拥护党的纲领，
遵守党的章程，
遵守党的章程。
前行步履铿锵，让每一次选择收获喜悦。
办下来了，太好了！
让每一份坚持绽放光芒。
新时代，新起点，新征途。
再难也要留住他们。
我们注视到你逆风向前的勇气，我们聆听到您追求卓越的心声。
拥护党的纲领，
拥护党的纲领，
遵守党的章程，
遵守党的章程。
完成任务，
我们努力，让您的前行步履铿锵，让每一次选择收获喜悦。
办下来了，太好了！
让每一份坚持绽放光芒。
尊敬的各位来宾，本次会议即将开始，请您尽快就座，并将手机等通讯设备关闭或置于静音状态。谢谢您的合作。
Ladies and gentlemen, the event will begin shortly. Can we please ask for you to kindly take your seats? We would like to remind you again to switch off all mobile phones and put electronic devices to silent mode. Thank you for your cooperation.
尊敬的各位来宾，本次会议即将开始，请您尽快就座，并将手机等通讯设备关闭或置于静音状态。谢谢您的合作。
Ladies and gentlemen, the event will begin shortly. Can we please ask for you to kindly take your seats? We would like to remind you again to switch off all mobile phones and put electronic devices to silent mode. Thank you for your cooperation.
尊敬的各位来
Distinguished guests, welcome to attend 2026 Tsinghua PBCSF Global Finance Forum themed as Global Financial Governance in a Changing World. I'd like to invite our moderator for today, Associate Dean and Chair Professor from Tsinghua PBCSF, Professor Zhang Xiaoyan.
School of Finance, Global Finance Forum, Global Financial Governance in the Changing World, New Challenges, New Opportunities, New Developments. Now, please welcome our moderator, Ms. Zhang Xiaoyan, Associate Dean and Chair Professor, Tsinghua PBC School of Finance.
Distinguished leaders, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends, good morning. Gathering high-caliber guests in the city of Chengdu, which is the Western Asian financial center. We are delighted to have the global grand opening of Tsinghua PBC School of Finance Global Financial Forum. On behalf of the organizing committee, I'd like to extend warmest greetings to all the distinguished guests, and I thank you for attending today's grand forum. We welcome all these high-caliber, top-notch experts. Now, please join me in giving a warm hand to heavyweight professor and also from the former deputy governor of PBOC, the former deputy managing director of IMF, Governor Zhu. And yesterday he attended a private session bringing insightful sharing. Today, he personally attends the opening ceremony. We again thank you for your presence. Now, I'd like to present the distinguished guests on the opening ceremony, including the former Deputy Managing Director of IMF, the former Deputy Governor of PBOC, Professor Zhu Min, Michael Spence, Nobel Laureate in Economics 2001, Philip H. Knight, Professor Emeritus of Management, Standard Graduate School of Business, Governor Masaki Shirakawa, former governor of Bank of Japan. And from the host city and the organizer, we have Mr. Guo Yong, Vice Chancellor from Tsinghua University Council. The Dean of Tsinghua PBCSF, Professor Jiao Jie, Deputy Party Secretary and Deputy Chairman, President of Shanghai Putong Development Bank, Mr. Xie Wei. Besides, we also have almost 100 high-caliber guests from home and abroad who will share their informative and insightful opinions later. Our Global Financial Forum has been held for the past 12 years in a row, a world-renowned top platform of financial idea exchanges. This year, our theme is Global Financial Governance in the Changing World, New Challenges, New Opportunities, and New Developments. We have convened over 100 top-notch scholars, industry executives, and central bank governors to discuss new trade and investment trends, market changes and dynamics, AI, green finance, digital finance, the BRI initiative, and the development of the Western financial center and financial innovation. We will have insightful idea exchanges and wisdom sharing. The forum is organized by PBCSF and co-organized by NIFR, IFR of Tsinghua University, also co-organized by Global Economic Governance 50 Forum and Reinventing Bretton Woods Committee. The late two organizations have provided us a think tank support. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank Sichuan provincial government and all levels of government with Sichuan province and Chengdu city. I'd like to extend our sincere gratitude. We would also like to thank our strategic partner, Pudong Development Bank, Huawei, Xinhua Network, and the Commercial and Rural Bank of Chengdu, Jiaozu Financial Holding Company of Chengdu. Now we will start the opening remarks. First, please invite Vice Chancellor from Tsinghua University Council, Mr. Guo Yong, to address us. Your Excellency Governor Zhou Xiaochuan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. In the early summer, Chengdu takes on a new look as distinguished guests gather here. Today, the 2026 Tsinghua PBC Global Finance Forum grandly opens in Chengdu of Sichuan Province. On behalf of the organizer, Tsinghua University, I extend my warm congratulations on this grand opening. I also extend a sincere welcome to all distinguished guests from home and abroad who have traveled from afar. I also sincerely thank Sichuan Province and Chengdu City for their strong support. I offer my high respect and sincere thanks to all colleagues who have long cared for and supported the high-quality development of Tsinghua University. At present, unseen changes in the past century are accelerating. The international landscape is undergoing profound changes. Unilateralism and protectionism are on the rise. International rules and governance systems are being significantly impacted. Deficits in governance, development, and security continue to stand out. Facing a world of turbulence and changes, strengthening global cooperation has become an inevitable choice for the international community to mitigate risks and challenges and share development dividends. Countries are also exploring and promoting the reform and improvement of global governance system. As a core and key component of global governance system, global financial governance is at a critical window of profound transformation, where opportunities and challenges coexist and intertwine. Only by building consensus among all parties and deepening dialogue and cooperation can we solve development problems, improve governance systems, and activate new drivers for global financial development. For a long time, China has always taken proactive responsibility and action, deeply participating in and promoting the reform of global governance system, continuously injecting stable forces into the improvement of global governance. The more turbulent the times, the more steadfastly we must move forward. Facing a complex and severe external environment of uncertainty, China uses the certainty of its own high-quality economic and social development to hedge against global market volatility. As the world's second-largest economy and the largest developing country, the fundamental reality of China's economy sustaining stable and long-term growth has not changed. During the 14th five-year plan period, China's average annual economic growth rate 5.4%, its contribution to world economic growth around 30% stably, fully demonstrating our vitality. In 2025, China's total economic output exceeded 140 trillion yuan, making our foundation more solid. The year 2026 is a critical year for the start of China's 15th five-year plan, with quarterly growth hitting a nearly 5-year high and the vitality of opening up continuing to be unleashed. Looking ahead, China will unswervingly advance high-quality opening up, deeply pursue high-quality development, continue to open its market to the world and share opportunities, thus providing more certainty and broader space for global economic recovery and financial development. In the new development stage and empowering the new development paradigm, the National 15th Five-Year Plan outlined clearly the major strategic development of accelerating the financial powerhouse, pointing the direction and providing guidance for the high-quality development of China's financial sector. Finance is to serve national strategy and to contribute to the building of a financial powerhouse. These are our mission and responsibility. Bearing in mind the nation's most fundamental interests, our university resolutely implements national financial development strategies, deepens financial discipline and talent cultivation, and fully promotes the high-quality development of our school. Carrying forward our legacy with unwavering commitment to our original aspiration, the Tsinghua PBC School of Finance, originated from the Graduate School of Bank of China, has been running for over 45 years. It holds fast to its founding aspiration and undertakes the mission of the time, focusing on national financial strategic needs and build a highland for financial talent and a high-end think tank serving the nation. Rooted in China with a global perspective, our school explores frontier areas of finance, deliver an objective, authentic, and powerful Chinese financial voice to the world, and contribute Tsinhua's strength to China's financial reform and development, to better empower the building of a financial powerhouse and build a bridge of financial exchanges. Our university issued several opinions on serving the building of a financial powerhouse in 2024, clearly proposing to build our school's forum, the Global Finance Forum, into a high-level, top-tier financial summit with global influence. Since its inception, the forum has adhered to a high-end, professional, and international positioning, building a quality platform for cross-sector dialogue among government, enterprises, and academia, and research institutions. It brings together government representatives, renowned economists, and top financial leaders from around the world to discuss trends and explore the future. This year's forum, themed Global Financial Governance in a Changing World, New Challenges, New Opportunities, and New Development, it closely follows the pulse of the times and industry trends, possessing both practical significance and long-term value. We hope all participating guests can speak freely, engage in in-depth exchanges, learn from each other, build consensus through deliberation, and pull strength through cooperation, and jointly contribute our wisdom and solution to building a fairer, more just, more inclusive, and more resilient global financial governance system. Finally, I wish this forum a full success, and I wish all the guests a happy stay in Chengdu. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Guo Yong. Also, we thank Tsinghua University for your consistent and dedicated support to each forum. Now, I'd like to give the floor to the Dean of Tsinghua University PBC School of Finance, Professor Jiao Jie, to address us. Please. Governor Zhou Xiaochuan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Today, we are seeing the happily convening of Tsinghua PBCSF Global Finance Forum 2026. On behalf of the co-organizer, PBC School of Finance, Tsinghua University, I would like to extend my sincere welcomes to all the guests who come afar, and I would like to express our support to leaders, partners, alumni, and medium friends. Thank you for your long-term support. And we are seeing the acceleration of once-in-a-century changes and the profound adjustment in the global economic and financial landscape are intertwined with a new round of technical revolution. The long-standing triple dilemma in the international monetary system has become more pronounced under geopolitical shocks and the spillover effects of major economies, economic policies. The global financial safety net, composed of IMF resources, regional financing arrangements, bilateral currency swaps, and currencies foreign exchange reserves, still face challenges such as a lack of coordination. The changes in the global financial system are no longer just cyclical fluctuations or partial adjustment. Cross-border capital flow, predictability, the credibility of cross-border contracts, and the stability of financial infrastructure. These conditions, once stable and even taken for granted, are now becoming variables. The financial system is undergoing a deep transformation from a market system dominated by efficiency and integration to an institutional system that equally values efficiencies, securities, and resilience. Finance is no longer just a tool for resource allocation. It is becoming part of national capacity. AI, digital currency, cross-border payment, green transition finance are reshaping global finance and governance borders. Faced with opportunities and risk to enhance global finance governance and cooperation, improve international governance structure, enhance system resilience. These are the challenges we are facing and the important foundations for future development. For many years, China has been an important contributor to world economic growth and global financial stability. China adheres to true multilateralism, actively participates in global economic governance, and firmly advocates economic globalization and trade liberalization. China don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we want to make progress together with times. We want to enhance representativeness, executive capacity, and effectiveness of the system. Against this backdrop, building a financial powerhouse has become an important strategic goal for China's development. The condition of a financial powerhouse goes beyond financial markets and institutions to encompass a set of systemic capabilities. And the ability to serve the real economy, prevent and control systemic risk, support technical innovation, maintain financial stability, and open conditions. China is exploring a path of financial development that suits its own development stage, a path of finance with Chinese characteristics. And I think such a path seeks balance among several relationships. As mentioned by President Xi Jinping, we should understand well the relationship between finance and the real economy, and the finance should contribute to industrial upgrading, technical innovation, and economic restructuring. Second is the relationship between financial innovation and financial security. Innovation will increase efficiency but also bring new risk. A good financial system should promote growth but also offset shocks. While encouraging innovation, we should also guard against risk and maintain a balance between development and security. Third, the relationship between market mechanism and effective governance. Market play a decisive role in resources allocation. At the same time, we need to improve institutions and regulatory systems. Market efficiency and governance capacity should go hand in hand. This is the basis for long-term stability of financial system. fourth relationship is the relationship between high quality opening up and autonomy. And China's finance development paths are trying to explore the relationship among the several key factors. And in 2026, China's 15th five-year plan officially begins. Faced with external uncertainties, China will use the certainty of high-quality development to strengthen confidence and stabilize expectations, continuing to contribute to China's wisdom and strength as a responsible major country. This year's forum themed Global Finance Governance in a Changing Landscape, New Challenges, Opportunities, and Development focuses on the core issues of global finance governance transformation. It aims to assess current global economic and financial risks and challenges, explore paths for building a new international financial order, serve as an important window to share China's financial stories and philosophy. 2026 marks the 115th anniversary of the founding of Tsinghua University and the 45th anniversary of PBC School of Finance. Inheriting the profound legacy of the graduate school of PBC and imbued with the spirit of Tsinghua University's century-old heritage, the school takes on the mission to cultivate financial leaders, advance financial practice, contribute to national rejuvenation, and promote world harmony. The school advances discipline development with a global perspective and continues to improve its multi-tiered talent training system for high-level finance professionals, including PhD, Masters, MBA, MBA, Master of Technology Transfer, etc. And also, the school is rooted in national strategy and closely follows market practice. It delves deeply into the 5 key areas of finance and continuously produces high-quality research results and policy reports, precisely serving the modernization of national financial governance system. The school has taken the lead in establishing the Tsinghua University FinTech Task Force, building a finance plus technology collaborative innovation system. Guided by Tsinghua University and the PBC and other supervisory authorities, the school will leverage the major opportunity of Tsinghua University Tongzhou financial development and talent training base, construct a strategic development pattern of one base, full center, and strive to build a world-leading financial school. Every step of the school growth and every achievement it has made would not have been possible without the guidance of national strategy, Tsinghua University, and the support of colleagues seated here. The Tsinghua PBC Global Finance Forum has been successfully held for 11 sessions since its inception in 2014, always rooted in China and with a global vision. The forum focuses on new ideas, trends, practices, and driving forces in finance, continuously building consensus, offering suggestions, and pooling strengths for the high-quality development of China's finance. It is worth mentioning that this year's forum is held in Chengdu, the first time the forum has been hosted in the Western region. As a core city of the Western Financial Center, Chengdu boasts a booming financial industry and a continuously improving financial ecosystem. Its deep commitment to the real economy and outstanding performance in empowering industrial upgrades have injected strong financial momentum into high-quality regional economic development, while providing excellent support and a favorable atmosphere for the smooth hosting of this forum. Distinguished guests, dear friends, changes breed new opportunities. Cooperation opens a new chapter. Tsinghua PBC School of Finance looks forward to continue to work hand in hand with colleagues from various sectors, alumni, deepening exchanges and cooperation, pooling development forces, and jointly helping to build a financial powerhouse, jointly promoting a fairer, more just, more inclusive, and more resilient global financial governance, and contributing more financial strength to world economic recovery and the common development of humanity. Let's wish this forum a full success. Thank you. A big thank to Dean Jiaojie about the building of a financial powerhouse and global financial governance. Now we would like to give the floor to Mr. Xie Wei, Deputy Party Secretary, Deputy Chairman, and President, SPDB. Honorable Governor Xiao Chuan, honorable leaders, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great honor to participate in this forum. At present, geopolitical, economic, military conflicts are increasing, intertwined with populism, trade protectionism, and counter-globalization. And financial institutions are used as tools to bring many challenges, and the global financial systems are facing challenges. Under this backdrop, centering on global finance governance, we try to generate a consensus and promote joint development. As a practitioner in financial sector, I would like to express my 3 points. First, global changes and the digital revolution are triggering economic paradigm shift. Digital economy and are triggering a new rounds of technical revolution and economic changes. Economic development paradigm are shifting. Digital economy are providing a pillar role, which are becoming more prominent. According to Global Data Center Bureau, in 2025, global digital economy exceeded $20 trillion, taking up 17.3% of the total world GDP. China's digital economy value added take up 10.5% of our economy. In the past 5 years, compound growth rate was 12.8% higher than the world China's national GDP growth rate. And digital economy are becoming an important driver of the China's economy. And the AI is a strategic technology leading the digital revolution, and AI is changing from digital virtual world to physical world. AI business scale are expanding. In 2026 first quarter, global risk investment invested in 6,000 new startups in AI sector, and with record high investment in this sector, a growth of 150%. And AI get the lion's share of this investment. And in 2025, the share was only 55%, and now it grows to much higher. According to China's data, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Doubao, Kimi, and other large language models, in the past 1 year, its capacity increased by 30%, and the multimodal operation capability increased by 50%. AI are applied in diverse sectors, for example, in automobile sector. Some of the car makers in R&D phase, they use the simulation technology provided by AI. They use simulation technology to do the car testing, and 94% of the simulation cases have less than 3% gap with the real case. Second, financial sector are reshaped by technologies, digital technologies. Digital technologies are bringing new tools to the financial sector, but also changing the business and operational logic of the financial sector. In business and service logics, and digital technology are changing the financial institutions from a fund provider to an ecosystem partner. And we are seeing the emergence of many new companies, and they are becoming important tools for promoting new economic development. According to data from China, by the end of 2025, digital economy asset reached 4.2 trillion units, and we have cultivated 15 flagship companies producing AI products, and we have set up 500 super plants and 35,000 basic AI plants. Technology companies have a large R&D, and they have a light asset. At the same time, they are of different shapes and in different business cycles. They require comprehensive, individualized, and full life cycle support from the financial sector. As a financial institution, we should make use of traditional credit, but also make equity investment, bond underwriting, and merger and acquisition loans, and wealth management, cross-border finance, and financial advisory services. All should be provided to our clients. And also, digital technology are reshaping our operations, promoting a shift from labor-intensive to intelligence-intensive sector, and we also need to input data in a more efficient manner. Digital economy, especially AI, can do them by themselves, cut the process into different links, and do the data aggregation by themselves. And back office operation can achieve end-to-end automation, reducing processing time. FI headcounts can be shifted from labor-intensive procedures to intelligence-intensive workflows. Third, how should the banks respond to technical changes? Commercial banks, as an important pillar of the financial system, faced with the changing landscape, we should prepare a new strategy to cope with these changes. We should focus on two areas to make a breakthrough. First, we should develop tech finance, promote technical innovation, and increase efficiency. Tech finance is an important endeavor and the direction of the financial sector, and we should set up a service system to support tech finance and establish a product chain. We should deepen the collaboration between commercial bank and investment banking, and also combine equity and bond tools to provide comprehensive services to our clients. SPDB, from 3 years ago, tech finance has been identified as a pillar industry of our bank. We combine investment banking with commercial banking with process banking, and we have established a combination of services combining equity investment, bond issuance, insurance, and other services. And we also provide a service plan, 5+7+X service plan. And based on life cycle needs of the client, we have come up with innovative products combining equity with bond. Besides this, we work together with universities to develop R&D in basic topics. We work together with Tsinghua News Research Agency to issue Tech Finance Index. On Shanghai Bond, we create a FTC community, and we organize 1,800 events promoting tech innovation with university students and scientists. And we have helped many GPU companies to get listed in China. And we focus on tech empowerment, use AI to promote digital transformation. According to KPMG, among the surveyed samples, 80% of the interviewed institutions are embracing technology in an active manner. 25 of the institutions are using AI in their process. By the end of this year, this percentage may be increased to 65%. Mature application of AI will increased by 2.5 times among financial sectors. And more commercial banks will use large language models to provide advisory services, call center services, and other kinds of services.
So as we evolve from experience-driven to data-driven models, starting from the early 2020s, we have continued to strengthen data empowerment and data-driven business models. In February last year, we deployed a local DeepSeek 671B large model with our own computing cluster. In October last year, we built our first use case of AI with more digital smart operations. In April this year, we deployed a local DeepSeek V4 model, maintaining a leading position in the financial sector. In the core business empowered by AI, we have used the AI to reshape our business processes. For example, in supply chain finance, we have shortened the hours-long manual approval to minute-level AI approval process with 96% of accuracy. Therefore, the AI-enabled business has seen a lot of traction. For the all-smart solutions, we are pushing our business opportunities to lightweighted operations with greater efficiency and accuracy. In providing inclusive finance, AI is accounting for 81% of the workload drivers. Amidst the changes, we have to be proactive in identifying and adapting to changes. Only in this way are we going to command the future. Together with all the other interested parties, we will continue to cooperate with all of you with win-win results, so as to embrace changes and transformation in order to build a more healthy, resilient, and robust global financial system, so as to contribute to global financial economic development. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the provincial and government of Sichuan, city government of Chengdu, and Tsinghua University for your long-standing help behind our bank. Thank you very much. I wish this Global Finance Forum a big success. Thank you, President Xie Wei of Shanghai Pudong Development Bank, sharing with us perspective of a practitioner about the latest trends of the financial sector industry. I'm very excited to share with you the news that so far we have been perfect in time management. I'd like to thank you all for your support. Now let's kick off high-level dialogue with three discussants. They are former Deputy Managing Director of IMF, former Deputy Governor of PBOC, Dr. Zhu Ming, Nobel laureate in economics 2001, Michael Spence. Also, he is Professor Emeritus of the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and also Masaaki Shirakawa, former Governor of the Bank of Japan. I'd like to invite all three discussants to come onto the stage.
Warmly welcome all of you come to this session. We're very honored and privileged to have two really excellent, renowned international speakers and to be with us this morning. We're so honored and happy. Mark Spence, obviously Nobel Prize laureate. I don't think I need any more introduction. Mark is well known for his growth theory. I think more than 20 years ago, you chaired the growth committee, and also Governor Zhou was a member. And I still remember reading your early book, Globalization and Growth, right? And your new book, as you call the Kara Crisis, yeah, it's it's a big one. It's a really, really interesting book. Described really a long-term volatilities in today's situation. I think it's absolutely a very impressive book, and I guess many people in the room read that book already. We're also very honored to have Masaaki Shirosawa, former governor of Central Bank of Japan. He's also a longtime friend of China. His new book just published, 39 years career in Central Bank of Japan, right? It's well received, and many people read your book and also in some way try to understand the Japanese situation and reflection to today's Chinese current situation and the whole world. But I don't know whether you know, the title is very different. Your original book in Japanese is your 39 years career in Central Bank, right? But your Chinese title is called Turbulence Times. You know that, right? It is a very turbulent time.
The same, but the English, the title of English version is the same.
It's the same.
That
Okay.
of China, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, but it's a really good book. I would strongly encourage everyone, if you haven't read that two books, I really enjoyed reading it. We're in such absolutely amazing moments, right? The war is still going on. It sort of slowed down, but oil prices jumped to 100, and inflation increased in U.S. PPI jumped to 6.1, and CPI reached about 3%. Inflation is really on the uprising, and government deficits is a basic concern for everyone, right? The whole world will probably reach 100% GDP of a government deficit in a few years. Not only U.S. and all the others. There's a lot of fragility, a lot of uncertainties. The key issues, what a war will look like after this war. The U.S. Iran war. Would oil price will go down and the shipments will go smooth once again, supply chain will be stabilizing, or we will have a new normal. If it's a new normal, what will be the basic character for this new normal? Or we're still on the trend, on the circle? I think that's maybe the question in everybody's mind, where we are in the global. IMF just downgrades global economic growth from 3.4% to 3.1%, and we may further downgrade the growth rates for next year and a year afterwards. Right, and the scenario analysis says the economic situation can be worse if the war go deteriorating and getting even worse. So Michael, what is your assessment?
Well, first of all, let me say it's a thrill to be here. I've been with you virtually, and so it's an honor and a privilege to be with you in person. And I really enjoyed Governor Zhou Zhexuan's comments, so we're going to come back to them later on. It's a very complicated world, so I think a certain amount of humility, in sort of assessing what's going on because of the multidimensionality of it is required. My assessment is that coming out of the pandemic, we were in the process of going through major structural changes in the global economy, one of which was the fading of deflationary pressures and the rise of supply-side induced inflationary pressures. In that context, the war in Iran looks like, another peg in the another step in this direction. When Gordon Brown and Mohammed El-Arian and I wrote that book, Permacrisis, in 2023, there was one war going on. That was the Ukraine war. Since then, we have two more, and lots more shocks, and so on. So I think a reasonable.
When you write in your book, you sort of see the war, type of war and the conflict will be a sort of normal situation not normal, but will happen more and more. Is that in your mind at that time? Because you call it a permanent crisis, right?
I got to be a little careful here. Did we predict 2 wars? No. The honest answer is no. What we did predict was that the stabilizing forces that we lived with for much of the post-war period were breaking down. The shocks were coming more frequently and were with greater severity. The geopolitical tensions were rising. The world is full of single points of failure and choke points. And they were starting to be used for strategic purposes, including non-economic ones. And so that all looked like a directional. But did we predict? I think so. So the consequence of this is maybe, but one, for much of the world to live in a great environment, dangerous because you mentioned, is going to suffer. That shock will be dependent, I think, heavily on how long the situation in the Gulf persists. I mean, if it goes on long enough, you're going to have not just energy price effects, you're going to have real, access, shortages, and then we're in a completely different world. So, at the risk of sounding too pessimistic before I turn it back to you, I mean, countervailing this is what every speaker has talked about, Governor Joe last night and everybody this morning, which is there is a potentially enormous impact on the supply side coming from artificial intelligence. I imagine we'll come back there. So if we do we have a potentially large productivity surge. And the question is, are we going to realize it, and how powerful will it be, and how much will it relieve some of these stresses, whether it's debt dynamics or growth or other things, but we'll get there.
Yeah, it is a new normal, right? Because you say it's a structure change.
Absolutely.
The supply change because AR, and the government debt is also a big fundamental issue. The war, if it lasts longer, and it really will change many, many things. But the most important you see is you don't know whether the conflict will happen, but stabilizing structure and the force are gone. It's not all gone, but it's really getting weaker and weaker.
It's much weakened,
It's much weaker, yeah. I think that's a very important point. That's a real concern now. So, Governor, what is your assessment for global situation today?
Okay. For inviting me as a panelist to speak as a panelist. It's my great honor and pleasure. You raised a question about, not only about heightened geopolitical risk, but also what would happen after the conflict is over. Looking into the future, what I think is important element or factor for. One is heightened geopolitical risk. The second is the rise of AI. The third is the rise of populism or the rising social disintegration. The fourth is demographic change characterized by rapid aging and declining population due to low birth rate. But first of all, I'd like to focus on short-run issue of heightened geopolitical risk. On this point, I have nothing to add to average view, which is accepted by the fund. We have to be concerned about the upside risk of inflation and downside risk of growth. That is a typical view. And the current uncertainty is human-made. And it is somewhat futile for us to expect how this uncertainty is resolved. And what is more important is how policymakers should react to this current situation. On monetary policy, the standard answer is banks have to look through shock flow and understand logics fully. But whether is the standard view rests on the view that the initial impact of inflation will be disappear, say, in a year. But in retrospect, we are seeing a series of geopolitical risks. For instance, pandemic, the conflict in Ukraine, conflict in Middle East, etc. So, but nonetheless, if central bank respond to supply shock on the ground that this is supply shock, this is temporary. So we have to live with the world in which this kind of supply shock persists. Of course, we don't know this is true or not, but we have to be humble on this respect. And central banks are now in a difficult situation. And as we know, the central bank independence is now under attack. And this is quite unfortunate. And if central bank lose independence, or even if central bank doesn't lose the legal independence, if monetary policy is biased toward this, then the consequence is very severe. And you have already mentioned about the risk of the government deficit or fiscal dominance. And fiscal dominance is not necessarily the act of government which push central bank to as particular kind of monetary policy. Fiscal dominance is coming from central bank itself because central bank tend to fear what would happen if they change monetary policy. So in a sense, it is own-made. So we have to be concerned about the risk of fiscal dominance if central bank independence is eroded. And I briefly touch on the issue of the demographic change. And as I said previously, what is most important is how society should act, how policymakers should react. On this point, my concern over the current debate on demographics is people are too much focused on dichotomy between demographic change and productivity growth. But based upon my experience in Japan, the both are interrelated. And so if growth of productivity is constant regardless of change, we don't have to be care about declining population. But based on my observation in my country, the negative population dynamics could weigh on product growth itself through various. So since we have to be prepared, policymakers and society have to be prepared about this kind of complex dynamic between productivity and demographic change. I stop here.
Thank you, Governor. And we'll come back to the demographic issue because such a big issue might also in your mind. But I noticed that both, really distinguished speakers when assess the global situation, they say we need to be humble. As Michael says, with humanities. Yeah. So that means the changes are huge, go beyond what now you understand. Yeah. We got to be very humble. Yeah. I really appreciate that one. I think that's show how much complexity of the global situation and limitation as a human. Yeah. And we've got to be very humble. I think this is a really, really a good point I would like to emphasize. But Governor, you raise a very important issue. So you just say, well, uncertainty is very high, yeah. Right? It's keep high. It's geopolitical driven. Yeah. We just don't know. I mean, really, from central bank point of view, from macroeconomy, how to solve those issues. But you say the central bank got to be very careful because classical macro policies, fiscal policy, monetary policy, not necessarily best tool to deal with uncertainty and geopolitical risk.
Yeah.
So when central bank use monetary policy tools, got to be very careful what will be accumulated consequences, you use that word.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important point. This is exactly the lessons you learned from Japan, right?
Yeah.
I think this is very important. So the geopolitical risk is such a different issues. It's a go beyond our so-called economists sort of way of thinking on the, can you go further? If the macro policy is not necessarily the best instruments to do that, what should we be more careful? What will be the proper tool to deal with this uncertainty?
The question you raise is very crucial. And frankly speaking, I do not know the, the fully convincing answer. Some years before Paul Volcker passed away, he said about the central bank independence. What he said is what is most important is that society should not expect central bank to deliver on what they believe. And central bank is of course important, but the central bank is not mighty institution. But nonetheless, I would say traditional thinking of macroeconomics tend to make central bank take more burden. And case in point is the Tinbergen principle. And the Tinbergen principle says the number of policy objectives and number of policy should be the same. And also, the policy should be assigned to the area in which that policy in question is most effective. Based upon this thinking, monetary policy should aim at price stability. And when there's a sign of mild deflation, then central banks are under the pressure to do everything, to do whatever without paying any cost. But if this kind of benefit does appear, but oftentimes benefit and cost are coexisting. But nonetheless, if central bank look at benefit only without paying any attention to side effect, then cumulative effect is enormous. So on the part of central bank have to take the approach of, so to speak, proportionality principle. And proportionality is important. But that is what central bank can do. But on the society side, or on the political side, they have to know the limit of monetary policy. But it is easier said than done. When I was a governor, I often mentioned about the importance of structural reform or structural aspect. But the more I speak about the need for structural reform, the more I was criticized on the ground that you are diverting the attention from central bank to others. But that is not my intention. But oftentimes, given that economy or society is not functioning well, the central bank tend to receive more criticism. So in this respect, the many parts of the society, including academics, think tank, etc., are crucial.
Yeah, this is once again, I mean, central bank in a very delicate situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, what is your view? How is traditional macroeconomic instruments or policy to deal with uncertainty, particularly geopolitical risk? It's really go beyond the supply chain, right? And but is there some way we understand or we can see the accumulative consequence? I think this is really a big challenge. How the traditional macro policy deal with the geopolitical risk and uncertainty?
Well, it certainly has a role. I mean, I'm thinking about my friend Kevin Warsh at the moment. So I think he has, if I can spend a moment on the American economy, in the current context, if you subtract the political dimension of the world he's going to have to live in, he has a relatively straightforward challenge. I mean, he believes, as he has said at the IMF and other places, that there's been mission creep, in the central banks, which means essentially the central bank has a certain set of roles. You can debate what they are, but it's certainly not the full range of adaptation to either uncertainty or major structural change. And in his view, I guess the top of the list would be the inflation one. So he and I even wrote something together on that subject in that long period of, extensive use of quantitative easing, which was arguably slightly distortionary. The reason he has a relatively straightforward problem, if you take away the political side, is we're going to have inflation. He ought to deal with it, directly when he takes office in a couple of days. And the American economy, unlike some of the other economies in the world, maybe more like China, but less like some of the, the European ones I know where I live, is strong enough to be able to live with higher real interest rates for a while. I do not think higher real interest rates are going to derail the current trajectory in the American economy. We have a mini productivity surge underway. It may get larger. We have a huge investment boom. I know some people think that's overdone. And we have pretty robust growth. So in that dimension, given his job, you've got pretty straightforward sort of challenge. The problem is he has a political superior overlooking him who wants lower interest rates, and then I don't know, honestly, how he's going to navigate that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you both emphasize when central bank deal with the current situations, go back to your original mandate. Inflation is the most important thing, right? But inflation can be driven by multiple, facts, and so central bank has still got to be very careful. I think that's a very important point, advice. And since we're talking about inflation, in the U.S. inflation is obviously jump up. But you say you have a very big productivity space growth, high investments. Are you concerned? Or Kevin is going to be a new chair, just approved by Senator, right? Kevin Warsh, and his balancing structure series. You convinced by his thought, or you think that there will some uncertainty? But also, because the Fed is changing from cutting rates to increase rate now.
So they may or may not increase rates. I think if inflation gets out of hand, they will. I mean, I think the question you're asking is, Kevin does believe this potential productivity surge is large and that it's an important function of the central bank. Goes back to the Greenspan era, not to cut things off by making an inappropriate and inaccurate assessment of the growth potential in the economy. And so I think the sensitive part of this, if I had to say it, is that we all worry about is timing. This is a timing issue, right? So you have these headwinds in terms of inflationary pressures, supply side problems, and so on, that many speakers have spoken about. They're immediate, right? The thing we don't know, even if we believe that the science and technology side will create long-term growth potential, is how fast it will kick in. And so I think the complex part of the job that you have done so well and that Kevin now has to do is to get the timing, of this right. So we don't have a surge of inflation, we don't have adverse distributional effects, but we don't cut off the potential productivity growth that we could.
Very important point. Everybody was debating whether the Fed will or should cut interest rates or raise interest rates, whether Kevin will be different from current chair and about whatever. But Michael, your view is the key issue is the timing. Yeah.
Key is timing, I think.
Yeah, because the fact behind inflation or deflation is a broader vector, so there's so many different things. But Japan is very much on the way to increase interest rates, right? Do you believe Japan central banker will continue to increase interest rates in the next 12 months? I think that is quite clear, right?
And I'm a private citizen, so I don't know the inner thinking of policymakers at the Bank of Japan. But the view from outside, it is very clear that, that central bank needs the interest rate hike. And on this point, the Bank of Japan itself is clear about the direction. They say that as long as the economic projection by the Bank of Japan is validated, and we have to raise interest rate. That is a key message. But it seems Bank of Japan is somewhat cautious about raising interest rate. But this creates a lot of problem, especially this act, the current real short-term interest rate is deep negative. That is one of the reasons why exchange rate is weak, why inflation rate is still increasing. So it is very clear. But as I said previously, I wonder what is the reason for the cautiousness about rate hike. And this is probably driven by the possible fear of what would happen if interest rate hike. And Coming White House described this kind of situation as a fear of hike. And the fear of hike is quite important. And whenever I think of fear of hike, I think that the side effect of prolonged monetary easing is quite serious. So coming back to your question, yes, the need for rate hike is clear.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing. You have to balance things. Financial sector will be happy, but the equity market is also concerns. Real sector obviously has concerns because debt is high. You have to think debt payments, of course. But really, internationally, if Japan continue to raise interest rates and all the world around sort of try to stay and cut interest rates, would that cause global capital flow change? Michael, you see that? Or you don't think that will matter very much? Because the capital flow between the world to Japan is quite volatile, back and forth.
I think financial people and central bankers are better at this than I am. At a fundamental level, I don't think, there are carry trades and, volatility and stuff like that. I don't pretend to kind of be an expert on that. But at a fundamental level, I think what's going to drive the important investments is the opportunity set in science and technology that you heard about. One of the things that's not talked about, and maybe this isn't the right place, but the AI is having an enormous impact in all of the sciences right now. Now, that won't show up in our statistics. It'll show up in the lives of our children and grandchildren in terms of the advances. It's everywhere: biomedical science, physics, material science, and so on. I think if I could add one thing, Min, China is doing one very important thing, and it's built into the 15th five-year plan. The potential of technology and artificial intelligence is dependent not only on the building of these powerful models, but on the adoption of them and the diffusion across the economy. And China, I think, to its great credit, has an explicit set of intentions with respect to this, the application of this technology, the deployment, doing whatever is necessary to make sure people understand it, have access to it, and so on, in finance, in manufacturing, in a variety of service sectors. This is what we call a diffusion challenge. And I'm afraid I have to say, we do not have explicitly stated intentions or policies on the Western side to do this, not in Europe and not in the United States. So we're sitting there with the potential to have this have a massive impact in software development, in the tech sector, probably in finance, but the construction sector, or parts of healthcare, or traditional retail, and a whole bunch of other areas are just maybe going to sit there, for structural reasons, for regulatory reasons, and so on. And so I think the other aspect of investment programs, both public and private, that's really important in realizing a relatively beneficial future is precisely the set that has to do with everybody in the room knows there's only two main players with respect to the development of frontier models. It's China and the United States. But the rest of the world has access to these models and can employ them and diffuse them. So this is it's the adoption and use of these that is to me, it's such a central question that it kind of dominates the others.
You raised a very important issue. AR obviously is one of the important factors today. It's increased productivity, cost of supply shock, and change the economic structure, as the governor also mentioned. But you also touched a very interesting, most important issue in today's real world, because there are two different models. Americans moving for the high technology, big model, ASI, and artificial super intelligence. China's application, diffusing, and really on the improve the productivity side. American looking for intelligent. So it's two different things. And how these two models will evolve? I think China, you see, I particularly as a Chinese, we see the AI is really moving to the manufacturing, to the service sector, to the industry very fast, and the goals is improve the productivity. But how do you see the US model at the end landed to bring the real economy much higher productivity? Do you see those things will happen?
I think it's an open question right now. I mean, there's lots of people concerned about it. There's lots of work being done, including by tech giants, on this question: how do we solve these problems? How do they make this accessible? But I think, let me just say, China's 31% of global manufacturing, extremely advanced in robotics. Robotics is moving forward pretty quickly. There's no doubt in my mind that China will be, if not the major, on a very short list, a major player in robotics. Having said that, robotics is advancing at a tremendous speed, but there's challenges. to go back to the theme of the conference, robotics does not have the kind of spatial intelligence that human beings have. And that's a really hard problem that some of the smartest people in the world are working on.
Nobody need a brain.
Yeah, exactly. It's this ability to process incredibly complex, rapidly evolving, and it's the progress in robotics. View is the United States countries will recognize the importance of and act more on that. Look more like the
I tend to do the to-be business now, but it succeed, right? But on your mind, talk about it, what is your answer on the AI? Also have a very strong.
And as you said, Japan used to be a country which has advantage in the IT politics. Nowadays is losing that kind of compared with decades ago. Now, and its center for, and it requires a cover system. And unfortunately, countries or area other than China doesn't have the equal. And Japan could play part of them. The Japan function as a for the epicenter of AI, and we are struggling. And I think the same is happening in Europe. It is important how right supported large. It is not easy for such policy to be implemented. And I'm very much interested in how views are generated in an AI-dominant society. And I am not expert on large language model, but my view is the out based on AI does not make any, whether this view is a view by expert, is by non-expert, but without any weighting, the majority view which is expressed in AI, in this community might be quite different. And the witness early sign of this thing. But I wonder what would happen if opinions are created. And given somewhat the pessimistic view, we have to think about how we could correct this by mechanism. It's a hard question. Is what I think.
It's a huge positivity on productivity, and everybody do believe. Because on the this, may hurt people and all the other things, negative things, we just so how can country human in general appropriately to promote AI for the future? A lot of said that different things, research. All I think it's very important because we are roughly 40 sessions already. We cover things is so distinguished as audience. So, one would like to have comments or have a question. So.
cover. I've been talking about advancement of AI and increased productivity. And like Governor Zhou mentioned last night, that will also lead to the reduction of employment rate. What do you think about the AI replacing human beings in labor force, and what's our solution?
Yeah, please. We'll go first.
Okay.
Governor.
Yeah, of course, the development of AI could demand labor, but this is good for at least Japan, which is ruling population, and the decline labor supply could be compensated by the rise in AI technology. So, and on circumstances, at least in the case of Japan, I don't think it is a major problem.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, so at a macro level, you know, if you have aging, declining workforces, and you know, that's not so bad. Look, people are terrified by this. So the thing I would add to this is we are now in the age of agentic AI, right? We're creating agents that do things they could do before, really quite complex. I believe we will overuse, right? And there's examples of that. So I think of this as a learning curve. We're all other, and once we've learned how to use I think we will come out in a reasonable place in terms of human culture. Having said that, our observation is there are now surveys that indicate that the attitudes towards AI form in emerging are in the developers. So you have a job and so on is this
is a very lot of debate concern replace or AI job. I think the governor says that also will happen. Please create a new job. That's for sure. Absolutely very important. Agentic is a very, very complicated. About the job is here to learn how to deal with. This is more important than we think about. I have trained this clearly because Michael mentioned agentic, and somehow I think that's a real not about job, but everyone as a human.
Okay, thank you. You raised the questions about AI introduced to financial operations and financial product designs and the pricing. There's a risk. How could we to come up with solutions to solve regulatory problem? The worried regulatory authorities, they want to regulate the market. They want to use AI for good. But right now, no doubt about it, there's a risk. How could we solve the problem of AI used insurance, banking businesses, and use it for the consumers of banks and the insurers for good? Thank you.
This is a very good question and also comments, because AI is so broadly used in financial sector today. But regulatory, obviously, now you generally adapt all the AI technologies. So what should the regulator to work on to catch up with the AI technology? I don't know who want to go first.
Okay, like technological advancement, AI could produce various kind of risk which we don't know, and Yesterday, we talked about Black Swan, and the same thing could happen. And especially what I am interested in is new correlation between several factors arises. For instance, several years ago, the people didn't think there's a correlation between electricity and the sector. But now, given the rise in AI, we are seeing increasing demand for power, increasing demand for semiconductor, increasing demand for data center. And resulting correlation changing. And this thing is now clear for us. But I think the many unseen correlationship could come up in future, and nobody knows. And therefore, what is needed is, first of all, we have to be humble, and on top of that, we have to make various research. And in that regard, the Tsinghua University and Business School and the PBC, the school, important, and we have to make research, we have to discuss, we have to find it. There's no quick solution to identify what is a risk.
And the risk is real because the number one is the speed. The risk is so fast. The second is the scale because it's interconnected. And the third issue is you really don't know what goes on. Maybe it's an agentic AR.
No, that's an important, I mean, you know, when you have change at this speed, there's almost always going to be a regulatory lag, so you just try to minimize it and not fall too far behind. I mean, the argument is in Europe, we got ahead of it. That is, but it's going to sound a little nerdy, forgive me, man. AI is part of a process of just revolutionizing the way the world is other things are put together in information, right? I mean, the internet did some of that, right? Changed the, you know, symmetries that we used to talk about. I mean, in the old, when a person selling a car to you could tell you anything, you had no alternative source of information. Now, whether you're talking about cars or medicine or anything else, AI is another earthquake in that area. So my recommendation is we need the entire community, you know, academics, regulators, and others, to try to understand, you know, what these shifting informational structures are. I think that's where Governor Zhou was going yesterday. For example, AIs are so good at imitating things that things that we took as reasonable signals before may lose their informational content, you know, because of the AI's capacity to imitate.
Yeah.
For example.
You understand what is a shifting structure. I think that's the most important. Governor, yes, please.
Thank you very much. It's a fascinating discussion. So
your name first.
Yeah. It was kind of what we see now is the world is moving from the rules-based system to more transactional relationship. And in this term, so been mentioned, like we have two superpowers in AI now, US and China. And so I'm wondering if it will be like a digital divide. So what the other countries should do? I mean, which models that they should follow, like invest into superintelligence or for practical using like China, and what standards would be? So what is the rest of the world should do? It's a kind of the common question.
Well, this is a big, big question. The first, the definition is we are moving from rule-based to transactional world. Wow, this is a big shift. The second issue is what about everyone, you know, besides China and the US should do, particularly with AR and shock. I think that's a big one. Michael, you first, and the governor. Yeah, you go.
Well,
you go.
I'm cheating because we were together in Kazakhstan talking about this about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So on the second question, I think the answer is there's a huge opportunity because this, adoption is different than being part of the frontier. And if I were, advising in virtually any part of the world that's not China or the United States, it would be a bit agnostic about who's got what and opportunistic. I think the China situation, because of the varying degrees of openness of the models, is a huge opportunity set. The costs are coming down on both sides of this equation, American and Chinese, in terms of what's sometimes called inference or queries or tokens or whatever. And so I think the opportunity set's there, but I would not only not choose up sides, but I would actively resist any pressure from either side to choose up sides. There is an issue that I believe President Xi Jinping and President Trump started to talk about, which is setting standards, at the level of the people who are building the frontier models, and that's an important issue. And now I'll let Masaki talk about the harder issue.
I'd like to pick up the second issue. And AI has a huge potential, and it could be used for almost all areas of our life. But given the limited resources, we have to focus on the area which a country has relative advantage. For instance, in the case of Japan, we are actually faced with rapid aging and declining population. And rapid aging creates a lot of problems. And AI could be used. For instance, I often go to the nursing care house where the elderly are living. And the work by care workers is very hard. And it is labor intensive. In this environment, the using AI in order to detect unusual behavior of people with dementia is very effective. And actually, that kind of system is being used in many parts of the world, but still it is at the early stage. And so my advice is countries should start with identify what area, in what area the AI could have potential.
Be positive. And there's a lot of opportunities, I think both sides in a clear way. We cover so many things, but this conference is very much about international monetary system reform. When we talk about geopolitical risk, fundamentally, it's economic changes. The fundamental geoeconomic change is American global still very high, but dropped from roughly 45% right after World War II to today's 24, 25, right? And the trade dropped from 18% to roughly 9%. But dollar account, although down from 78, but still 56% of reserve currency. So you see it's an imbalance when the geo economy changes. On China's side, the Chinese GDP from very low to roughly 16% today. China exports roughly 14% from very low. And RMB global reserve ratio is only roughly 2.1%. And if you bring them together, you see a clear imbalancing. And there also you see the AR is another force to shape the international monetary system, but digital currency, CBDC, stablecoin, payment systems. Would that change, you see in the near future, a big fundamental change in international monetary system? Governor, you go first.
My short answer to a question is, in the near future, which you mentioned, I don't see a big change. The international monetary system always needs the currency of currencies. And like barter trade is inconvenient, that's why money is used. And the same is true for the currencies themselves. Given numerous currencies, we need currency. That is international key currency performed by US dollar. And in the near future, the reason why I don't think there's not major change is there's no alternative. And also, strong network effect is working. And for instance, the Europe is still, Euro area is lacking in a government of area as such. And this, the prerequisite for currency stability is fiscal stability, deployment of fiscal resources in a crisis. But as the European debt crisis shows, the government at Euro level as such. As for renminbi, and the currency convertibility is crucial. And of course, I know that China is making effort on this front, but still it lacks in full convertibility. Given this situation, I don't think major change is occurring. But coming back to your question, whenever I think of the impact of geopolitical risk on financial market, what is most important is who does play the role of lender of last resort on a global scale. When I was a governor, the important thing was the US dollar swap line, which was started in the fall of 2008. I'm pressured to say what was the most important decision at that time. Would definitely say the start dollar swap line was, and how this swap could work in the next crisis triggered by geopolitical risk. And in recent, the US, the Europe developed bilateral currency swap, and the effectiveness of this currency swap could be tested in crisis. But chance no major change.
That's the point. In short term, you give all the very solid details. But another issue is who will be the lender for the last resource. That's a determining factor. And in China, particularly, started with the Governor Zhou, we have an RMB swap. It's getting bigger and bigger. It's also very interesting things. But I think of a very solid analysis. Michael?
It looks to me, so if you compare the world we lived in before, where people were behaving according to the rules, this looks like, A, it's different, it's less pleasant, and more rocky, you know, subject to bumps. So the way I think about it is in two parts. One, the country I'm a citizen of seems to have kind of dropped out of the multilateral systems, including agencies. But the rest of the world, including especially China, seems committed to multilateral structures. Now, they have to be adapted. So I'm not, including in the financial area, so I'm not terribly worried at this point that there's been a wholesale ban of those kinds of systems and their inclusiveness and their benefits. So I just wanted to say that. The only thing I have to add is a question, since I live, the euro is a potential, but in order for that to become a reserve currency, or an interesting currency, but for that to happen, the markets have to be, right now it's Germany, Italy, so on. So the candidate dollar is completely open, and Europe only if we move in the direction of making the euro a kind of European-wide currency in the sovereign debt markets?
Yeah, good. We are really on time. It's very, very good. And we still give me to summarize this conversation. We cover so. And the first issue, situation complicated, volatile, and so many things happen. When we assess the situation, we got to be humble. I think this is a really, really two speakers emphasize. I absolutely agree with. I think the second issue is AI is such a transforming power. We also we are adaptive. We have to learn. We're not only looking for sort of repeat the job issues, create more job, but more fundamentally, how much you change the job, change the human, change the society. We even did not touch agentic AI, talk about payment system, right? I mean, those things that happen, so we also got to be humble. I think this is also a very important issue. The world changed dramatically, but we need to go back to the rule base, as Governor mentioned. I think the majority of the world want to go to societies. So we need to work toward a better future. I think this is the consensus, I think, probably with all the room here. So fascinating conversation. Please, big or excellent to speaker and Masaki.
I'd like to thank all three in this high-level dialogue. Thank you for your insights and excellent, wonderful sharing. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the opening ceremony for Tsinghua PBCSF Global Finance 2026 is drawn to a successful conclusion. Please stay tuned for our thematic sessions and closed-door sessions so as jointly chart a new future for the finance sector. Now let's kick off our first thematic session, which is about the reconstruction of the international monetary system. I'd like to invite our moderator, Mark Uzen, to come to the stage to moderate this session. Mark Uzen, Executive Director and Founder, Reinventing Bretton Woods Committee.
Okay, dear guests, dear ladies and gentlemen, let me first thank the organizer for inviting us here for this very influential forum, and I'm very pleased that our think tank is so part of this conversation and discussions, and I'm going also to congratulate the organizer for a great organization and a great program for the next 2 days. We are going to begin on reconstruction of the international system. One to our guests here and to our audience who are also watching on, but also I would like to thank warmly We are going to introduce our speakers who will come to the floor and come to the panel. I wanted to give you the context of our discussion this morning, and Governor Shirakawa, Minzu, and Professor Michael Spence already mentioned the reform of the international monetary system, and they gave us already some thinking about Is it possible to reform the international monetary system? But before we go to the whole conversation we are going to have, let me give you the context of what we are going to discuss with our well-known panelists. It seems to me today that there is a consensus happening among central bank governors and senior policymakers. And this consensus is about, and with increasing clarity, that we are at a very inflection point in the international monetary system. It's not a cyclical stress test, but it is a structural transformation. And it is clear that the existing framework that were not built for what we today. The monetary tools constructed for cyclical shocks and measurable uncertainty are confronting something. Six transformation, demographic, climate, technology, multipolarity, insurance shocks, and geopolitical fragmentation that each of our speakers today understand very well. The panel that we brought together represents the geographic, institutional diversity we need to think. Central Asia, East, China, the US. 5 perspectives that don't share the same relationship with the dollar, global financial safety net. So the question for us today is very straightforward. The system, yes, but on what foundation? What are going to be the tools? And in this context, let me welcome now all our speakers, panelists, to the floor. Jacob? Very good, very good. Thank you very much, all our speakers who have been flying all over the world to join this very important panel on the of the international monetary system. I give you the context earlier before about what we are going to discuss. Let me introduce briefly our speakers, and after I will go for an introductory statement for 7 minutes for each of them, followed by Q&A and another round of conversation. Welcome Mr. Jean-Marc Ortobaev, the former Prime Minister, Jacob French, the Board of Trustees of 30 for the IMF, Governor of the Bank of Israel, a long career of the expert on the international system. Ali Babajan, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Turkey, former Finance Minister, who have been involved during the G20 presidency in 2015. Professor Xingang, the chair professor at Tsinghua PBCSF, welcome. And last but not least, Nouriel Roubini, professor at NYU Stern School of Business. So, group of speakers, different backgrounds, different parts of the world, as I mentioned at the beginning. So the way I want to start maybe would be to kick off Jacob. Not only Israel first on the architecture system is decision logic, is stress point, and the condition under which it can be reformed, maybe replaced. I'm going to look at you in particular in that are underweight in the current debate. The role of policy among the major economies as a precondition for any meaningful international monetary system reform, the management of global imbalances, a question that I return with full force. I just wanted to tell the audience a vote that came out a couple of weeks ago by Ellen Ray, Axel Weber on global imbalances, and critically, that no serious conversation of the international monetary system is complete today without addressing China's role as a creditor nation. So your perspective on how China rise reshapes the coordination problem will be essential to the panel. So Jacob, the architecture of the current system was built on a set of assumptions about policy coordination, share rules that are now under pressure. How do you assess the role of China in the international monetary system, and is meaningful macro policy coordination still possible in a world of geopolitics and strategic rivalry? Jacob, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Since I'm the first speaker on this panel, I would like to express deep gratitude to the organizers, to my dear friend Jo Min, to the collaboration between Tsinghua University and the PBOC, and to China in general. You asked me a question, and I must admit that the first question, the same question, was asked of me 40 years ago. And then you ask yourself, how is it possible that 40 years later we are still asking the same question? It is exactly 40 years ago that I joined the IMF on the invitation of the managing director, Jacques de la Rosière, to be the economic counselor of the fund. And his first question to me was, what should be the nature of coordination and cooperation among nations? What is the role of the fund? And I was wondering if in 40 years later we still ask the same question, how come we don't have the answer? I'll give you the answer to this question in two parts. Part number one, in 40 years from now, when you meet here, and you will meet, I know, you will ask the same question. And it's not because you will not work hard to find the answer, but because the world is changing. The questions may be the same, but the issues are different. The players are different. The constraints are different. And we better be sufficiently flexible and open-minded to realize that the world that is changing requires a modification of our approaches. So let me come to your question. Is coordination still important and cooperation? When I started my career in this game, if you can call it game, there were three players. We call them the G3, the United States, West Germany, and we also talked about Japan. Those were the G3. And then when one realized that if one country sneezes, the other catches pneumonia, you need to take it into account. And they decided who should meet in order to decide how to internalize those externalities. And the decision at the time was 5. So Germany, France, West Germany, I should say, France, the United States, Japan, and help me out, and the United Kingdom. Italy was not part of it, Canada was not part of it, and they met in the Plaza, it is called the Plaza Accord, in order to discuss policy coordination. Who was in the room? Ministers of Finance, no central bank governors. Central bank governors or central banks in general were not part of this discussion. They were executing of the decisions that were made by governments. Fast forward, 2 years or 3 years later, in Louvre, in 1987, then central banks were invited, but also only to the closing ceremony. Fast forward to the next crisis, the one that is in our lifetime, your lifetime, you are younger. 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, 2031, 2032, 2033, 2034, 2035, 2036, 2037, 2038, 2039, 2040, 2041, 2042, 2043, 2044, 2045, 2046, 2047, 2048, 2049, 2050, 2051, 2052, 2053, 2054, 2055, 2056, 2057, 2058, 2059, 2060, 2061, 2062, 2063, 2064, 2065, 2066, 2067, 2068, 2069, 2070, 2071, 2072, 2073, 2074, 2075, 2076, 2077, 2078, 2079, 2080, 2081, 2082, 2083, 2084, 2085, 2086, 2087, 2088, 2089, 2090, 2091, 2092, 2093, 2094, 2095, 2096, 2097, 2098, We were saying that central bankers have become the only game in town. Where are the governments? And we said governments have tough political constraints. They cannot really participate in the right debate because their hands are tied. During one crisis, they extended their debt in a level that is very high, so therefore fiscal policy is constrained. They lowered interest rates to levels that are much too low, and therefore monetary policy is constrained. Same issues, different constraints. What questions should they answer before they sit around the table? I would say there are at least 6 W's and 1 H. What are the W's? Why should we meet? Well, the answer is clear. We meet because there are externalities, and we should internalize them. Who should meet? At the beginning, it was governments, then central bankers, so the who. Where should we meet? And indeed, there was a big debate. Should they meet in the United States? Should we meet in other places? And we decided to have a rotation. What should they discuss? In the first discussions, it was fiscal policy. In the second discussions, it was already monetary policy. In the third discussion, it was already trade policy. And then they realized that you really need to have an orchestra. So another W was, when should they meet? Some argued we should meet at times of crisis. Why not? But then others said, no, it should be on an ongoing basis. And therefore, the issues and the principles are with us, and of course, the how, the H, is the most important question. Because there is no consensus today of what does it take to do good economic policy, in contrast with what it was before. Let me take you to a concert, and I went to a concert last week. It was a concert of Beethoven, and there was a fantastic concert. And at the end of it, in the corridor, people said, well, it was great. Why was it great? Because Beethoven was great, the composer is good. Oh no, because the orchestra was good. Why was the orchestra good? Well, because the conductor was good. So you need to have the conductor, you need to have the good music, you need to have the good musicians. We used to have in the international system a conductor that was the best. We relied on it. The United States was the hegemon. It led the orchestra. I don't need to tell you now that there are questions and challenges. Is the conductor interested in conducting? Are the musicians fully respecting of it? Then there was the question of the music. What music? Some years ago, there was a consensus. We called it the Washington Consensus. We knew what needs to be done. We may have had difficulties about how to do it, but we knew what needs to be done. Now it's debatable. When Maastricht was created, Europe, we knew what the Maastricht Treaty was supposed to be. Now there are some questions. So the music is not clear, the conductor is not clear, and the musicians themselves. In the plazas there were 3. Later on there were 5. Later on there were 7. Later on 7 plus 1. And the main difference from the early days in which governments could call the shots is that now it's the private sector. Most of the action takes place in the private sector. And most of the actions that not take place in the trade area, which was the subject of the Bretton Woods Conference, but rather in the financial capital markets area, in a very different way. So when today we are saying, let's discuss, let's plan, capital markets go very, very quickly. And before you turn around, the results are in front of you before they even have been implemented, because expectations are key. And in a world in which expectations are key, this is a world in which you have to have great care. There are many C's: clarity, collaboration, communication, cooperation, coordination. All of these are the C's that are were not in place during the Bretton Woods Conference after the Second World War. Let me tell you, the atmosphere today is an atmosphere in which I have great doubt if the IMF and if the World Bank would have been created. The consensus that is required is lacking. So that's why I would say we are now in a place in which you called it, it's a turning point, and a very turning point. Are we going to stabilize it, or are we going to run away from it? And that's the key issue, because I really think that the interdependence in the world is still there. We are talking about fragmentation, and if there is fragmentation, it does not mean there is no interdependence, but it does mean is that the machinery that we used to have to internalize the externalities is a little bit broken. And therefore, the challenges are even bigger, not smaller. And when people say, I will go it alone, in fact, it means that you are going to be much weaker. There is no way you can go it alone in a world in which there is so much externalities and so much global issues. So I would say, Mark, that the challenges that face us are not smaller than before. They are even bigger. I don't know, do I have another moment or not? 1 minute. Okay. The world is not symmetric. We are all trying to say, let's have a symmetric world. But the world is not symmetric. If the orchestra needs a conductor, the world also needs to have a hegemon. Because in an asymmetric world, there may be a mess. In the Bretton Woods system, they recognized very well this lack of symmetry. It is called and coined by Robert Mandel the N-1 problem. When there are two currencies, there is one exchange rate. So when there are N currencies, there are only N-1 independent exchange rates. There is 1 degree of freedom that needs to be allocated, and this is the thing that defines a system. So in the Bretton Woods system, this degree of freedom was assigned to the United States. It pegs the price of gold, and the rest of the countries are pegging the price of the dollar. This is the way the asymmetry and the N-1 problem was solved. Now that we do not have that particular asymmetry, we still have the N-1 problem with us, and therefore whoever is designing and defining a system needs also to be very specific to tell us how the degree of freedom is allocated, because the world is not symmetric. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. I will come back to your template about...
Yes, I did not speak about China, and I'll be happy to speak about China later.
Jean-Marc, if I go on you now to try to give us a sense, not about Central Asia particularly, but really from the global South perspective. If you look at, over the last 2 decades, one of the most important proponents of the reforming of the international monetary system and the global financial architecture has been the global South. So what did you make of it? Is it still a sense of potentially bringing the perspective of the global South, and what are the prerequisites and what are the demands? Please, over to you.
Thank you. First of all, I cannot stop myself from congratulating organizers of our forum, because it was possible for them to attract outstanding speakers and participants, and I'm especially excited by big amount of young people who are listening to us. This is future world, and we will try to do our best to feed you with the right ideas. In my short intervention, I want to focus about 2 things, 2 words. First, about globalization, and second, about trust. You may ask what in Central Asia is to nothing, global situation, whatever, or trust. But I will say you one thing, is Central Asia is a unique region because we have 0 enemies in the world. We are observing situation a little bit from, apart from the global events, but at the same time, as a neutral observers, we see some observation. and let me say some modest observation from my point of view, what's going on the last couple of years. For everybody clear that last few decades, Global South is winning competition with Global North for different reasons. So economic area, Global South picking up more and more market share. And economics is just basic for everything, like Karl Marx said a long time ago. But last couple of years, Global North start losing another element of hard power, which is military power. Let's say we can put a lot of examples in front of you, but last year, a very sharp observation was observed how deeply the US and Europe depends on rare earth. Incredible. And with the monopoly, which is China is getting not only exploring, but enriching this element, immediately changed geopolitical map of the world. This year, we observe another phenomenon in the Middle East. So Global North don't have any more enough weapons to fight a relatively regional conflict. So now it looks like Global North in competition, another hard power, which is in the military. Only one kind of instrument left is monetary policy. And unfortunately, this element is starting to use as geopolitical weapon. And then I want to, being in China, I want to reflect on what Confucius said many centuries ago. And he said that all talks are meaningless if there is a lack of trust. And we're talking about trust. What's going on in building trust in our world? Bretton Woods system created by introducing unique system of international monetary system, introducing deep, transparent, and liquid capital markets, underpinned by robust legal institutions and predictable rules. This system worked very well for many decades. Investors still buying dollars, not because they like greenbacks or America, but only because dollar in the moment of fear and panic, creating trustable system. Bretton Woods, the dollar system, SWIFT, the overall banking, the entire financial architecture rested on predictability and trust. It's like a solar system, when trust, around the word trust, rotating different elements of financial system. But in 21st century, quite recently, money itself has become a weapon. The question is no longer merely, will the issuer repay the debt? The new question is purely political. Will the issuer allow us our own money? The global challenge, competition, global competition will be rotating only around economic power and military power. It will be rotating around payments, systems, reserve assets, digital currency, and financial infrastructure. So in the modern world, whoever control and manage trust to outside world, which is getting more powerful, will be controlling power. So my message, everybody around the world, including international financial transaction, must do everything to build trust around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have already two concepts that emerge here: hegemony, weaponization of interdependence. We will come back to that later on. So let me now call on Ali Babajan. I forgot to mention that Ali was also former Minister of Foreign Affairs. This is because we are talking more not economics, but also about geopolitics. So really, Turkey is in many ways a paradigmatic middle power in the international monetary system. Significant enough to feel every asymmetry, not powerful enough to change the rules unilaterally. What does the experience tell you about the priorities of international monetary system reform? And do you see a role for middle power acting collectively to shift the architecture, or is that coalition impossible to build? And of course, I will reflect and remind you the Mark Carney speech last January in Davos about the coalition of the willing. Please, Ali, over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. And I'd like to also extend my sincere appreciation to Tsinghua University and all the organizers for having this event in Chengdu. Well, Turkey is actually a member of G20, and G20 was something which we were expecting quite a lot, because we had the representation of all the continents, we had the representation of developed countries and developing countries, and also international institutions were around the table, like the IMF, World Bank, even African Union, European Union as well. Although we had high expectations about the setup, unfortunately, it didn't produce the results that the world was expecting, or at least most of us were expecting. So there is definitely a need now for new thinking about how multilateralism will work in terms of fora. It is definitely a difficult time for many countries across the world. There are energy price shocks affecting all of us. Climate change and financing the climate change is a big challenge. There are natural disasters more and more happening due to climate change or natural disasters like earthquakes. And also regional geopolitics have become a real challenge in more and more parts of the world. Now, and meanwhile, there's an inevitable evolution taking place in the international monetary system. As of now, we don't know yet how this evolution will reach, how this evolution will finally shape up the system. For middle powers like Turkey, the priority is, of course, financial stability, trade fluidity, and also liquidity in emergencies. And at this point, I would like to emphasize 3 points. The first point is trust, like the Prime Minister already made, trust. And now we are observing more and more cases of weaponizing of financial instruments. And this is eroding trust very fast. So when we are observing some countries which are being limited in order to access their reserves, or when we are observing the limitation in terms of transactions, and especially when these decisions are being taken unilaterally by just one country, then the level of concern is higher and higher, and the trust is eroding. We have to have predictable rules about what needs to be done. There has to be a multi-mechanism which will decide on limitations reached to reserves or limitations of transactions. We have to have norms like using proportionality, or there has to be a multilateral review before these sanctions are being implemented. And also using the sanctions as a last resort maybe should be the rule. And if there is going to be a sanction, this has to be decided by United Nations Security Council or a similar mechanism which has the power and the legitimacy to do it. So trust is very important, and and this is eroding very, very fast. The second point which I want to emphasize is inclusivity. Many international institutions, including the Bretton Woods, the share of voice has never been democratic or has never been just, meaning that we have to have the countries having their share of voice represented at the international institutions, so that whatever international institutions decide should have global or regional legitimacy. So inclusivity in terms of making decisions in international financial institutions is very, very important subject. And also another aspect of inclusivity is reaching to liquidity. So access to liquidity should be a global public good, not an privilege. So there are already some work, especially within the IMF, about pre-qualifying countries for criteria, so that if there is an emergency, the liquidity is provided at a very fast speed. So in terms of inclusivity, share of voice and also reaching to liquidity in cases of emergencies, I think very, very important to work on. And the last and the third point which I want to emphasize is interoperability, meaning that we are already in an era of multiple systems. And as Jacob said, there is no conductor now in the system. And what should be the goal? The goal is more connectivity and more common protocols, meaning that we should have standards in messaging and authentication. So having multiple systems is probably going to be inevitable. When I say systems, I'm talking about payment networks or digital currencies. And there will be more of a diversification in terms of reserve currencies, which is going to happen more and more, because lack of trust inevitably urges people to find new alternatives, more trusted alternatives, if possible. And this interoperability is going to be a very important subject as we go along between the systems. And the success of the new monetary order, in summary, is not going to be measured by who wins. It is not a battle that we are fighting each other, and it's not a matter of who is going to win. It is about going to be, the success is going to be measured by how trustworthy, how inclusive, and how interoperable the system is finally. So for highly connected economies like Turkey, the objective is not chaotic decoupling. The objective is managed competition and shared rules. Otherwise, we could find ourselves in much more difficult situations. And let's don't forget, it's not just about the spillover effects of just one reserve issuer, but it's also the possible spillback effects, which will eventually, in the medium to long term, affect all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. I will come back to you maybe later on about the role of the G20. We have US sharing G20 this year. People call it a gap year because it's very hard to see what is it. But what might be a way later on, either to reform the G20, or do you think the G20 will still have a role to play in this new configuration of power? But before doing so, let's now move over to Professor Shikang. Thank you, and thank you for coming. You know that I'm going to ask you the question: what is the perspective from China about the international monetary system reform? Give us a sense not only about multipolarity, but I think a better understanding about the CBDC, Digital Yuan, the skepticism in China about stable coins, cross-border potential. So it would be nice to understand where do we stand today. Everybody here in this audience knows what China has been doing in terms of building what I call a parallel governance, the creation of the AIBs, the new development bank. We talk about global liquidity, many swap lines among central banks around the world, and a very important commitment for many years to play a role for the reform of the international monetary system. Please, over to you.
firstly, I will, to appreciate, my co-organize this great kind of session. I'm truly honored and delighted to be here today to share some thoughts and observation from the Chinese perspective. So before addressing the question, I would like to make a few kind of points. I think that is the basic the background for the current global political economy or global monetary system. So my first point is that the geopolitical could be a new normal for a long time. So right now the global economy and the global geopolitical are going through a profound and structured change back to the previous. So we always globalization and the the geopolitical looks like the two ends the pendulum. So that in the past 40 years, so globalization goes much way to the one side. But today, I think the geopolitical economy come back. So that's and even become more severe than we expected. So for before the the year, we always believe that the world is flat. But now we realize that geographic conflict is coming. So that's I think also the Robert Karan's book, The Revenge of the Geography. So the geopolitical never leave us, just we forgot. So that's so in this sense, but of course the globalization is still there. It's not dead. Just changes the way become more complicated. So that the global economy is mixed with these kind of two forces, globalization and the geopolitical economy. So that's, I think, the first observation. So we realize that that's this background. And the second point, I think, must realize that the current account, the trade imbalance is coming back again. And especially this time, the imbalance is different from the previous one. The previous one may be driven by the globalization, the trade reform, a lot of things. But this time, instead, it's different. It's driven by this kind of tariff war, the geographic conflict, and even the the reorganization of the global value chain. So. So it's difficult to fix this global imbalance. The global imbalance has been, become a minor issue after this the financial crisis, but this time come back again and with a different conform and a different kind of driving source. So, in particular, I think it's related to our kind of sessions. The topic, this time's the global imbalance might be driven by the mismatch between the international trade system and the international money system, the mismatch between them. So as we already see that in the past, maybe 50 years or 60 years, so we see a lot of countries like Germany, Japan, all have the current account surplus. For a long time. In other, all this kind of manufacturing kind of big power have this kind of the trade surplus, but only the U.S. country, the country with the the reserve currency, run this kind of long and persistent deficit. So that's could potentially say something is the current the global system is doesn't match this kind of the globalization and doesn't match this kind of the the current kind of the structure of the economy. So that's we should take that into consideration. And the third one, I think, is given this kind of return of the geopolitical conflict and the also the greater the global imbalance. So I think the inflation might come back. I think that's would be the disaster for the whole world, especially as we know that the recent kind of the Middle East kind of war and push up the oil price and then go through the the global value chain. Even U.S. might be less hurt by this kind of the oil price because they are now a major kind of oil price export. But eventually, this kind of inflation will pass through to this kind of the U.S. and through this kind of the feedback effect in the global value chain system. So as we already see that, the last week, the U.S. CPI is already goes up to the 3%. And in the weekend, the 30-year Treasury bill is rising to above the 5. And the 10 years, yield rise above the, 4.6. So that's make the Fed has the, huge pressure to change the original plan to cut the interest rate instead of, raise the interest rate. And this could be potentially lead to another round kind of the financial crisis. So given this background, it's difficult to adjust this kind of to reconstruct the global money system. So compared to the 40 years ago, this time even maybe it's the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. I think we have very small room for the for policy for the government. If you look at the U.S., so we have the U.S. have the high level of debt, high level of inflation, and it's kind of so difficult to use a policy to deal with that. So that's also should be. So given this background, I think we must to sit down and coordinate to discuss how to deal with it. Otherwise, I think the crisis must definitely will come. So China is doing well. From Chinese, as a Chinese economist, we are very proud of our kind of economic achievement. So China is also willing to contribute to to the global kind of community. So related to this kind of the global money system, I think our strategy is very kind of slow and stable kind of approach. So basically, we don't have any kind of intention to replace the current dollar system, or we want to develop a separate parallel kind of system. So that's I think the message is very clearly. The only thing China want to do, or China's goal, is that basically we want to shore up the weakness of the current global system. Okay? In Chinese is 补短板. Then we want to also build a kind of diversified kind of currency system. More kind of currency will be involved to match the the current kind of global economy. And finally, we want to safeguard the global financial stability. So we want to contribute, and we not want to replace it. So more deeply, I think China basically do four types of things, to contribute to kind of global mindset. Firstly, I think is the renminbi internationalization. So we expanded the use of renminbi in the international trade, investment, and even in the reserve currency. For example, in the 2024, this kind of the settlement is already reached 64 trillion, and last year is 70. So that is the renminbi has been widely used, in the a lot of countries, especially in the the belt and load countries. And also, China do a lot of things to build this kind of financial instrument like the chips, because the SWIFT has been always been used as a kind of weapon to threaten the country. So China, developed this kind of this chip system, and now the chip system has bring a lot of benefit for the kind of a lot of countries. So the make this kind of global settlemental and more efficiently. So. And thirdly, also China, signed a lot of kind of currency swap, provided the global kind of liquidity for the country like Argentina or the other kind of the Middle European country, so that to increase the global liquidity. So that's the contribution or efforts to help these kind of countries. So. But eventually, China will be, open up the current account in an orderly and prudent manner to provide a kind of more kind of renminbi denominated asset to the world. So that will be make the world have the more kind of safe asset. Finally, I think China always advocated to the more wide use of the SDI in the IMF system. And that's, I think, will beneficially, all the countries. So I think that's, what we learn from China.
Thank you very much. Now, let's move now to Nouriel Robini. Nouriel, I position you to close this first round of opening remarks to reflect not only about the diagnostic of the international monetary system, but also the financial system. We talked in the first sessions about supply shocks, negative one with the current energy crisis, but maybe a transformative one that is going to be positive with the AI that can increase productivity. We talked also yesterday night at the dinner about the rise of stable coins, digital money. So give us a diagnosis about a world where we have been talking weaponization of money, weaponization of interdependence, sanctions, but at the same time, the global macro context, very fragile in the short term, but as also in the medium term, a lot of multiple uncertainties.
Thank you, pleasure being here. Well, the way I would put it is that it's clear that the rule-based international order is challenged, if not in a crisis. When we think about the order, it's not, of course, just a monetary, financial, and trading order, but also the geopolitical and the security one. What's going on in the world, probably you have to understand that there are changes in the international order, regime, or system from a situation of relative order and stability to one of relative instability, disorder, if not chaos. And I think that three major aspects that one has to consider: changes in the economic order, this economic, but also monetary, financial, investment and trading one, changes in the technological order, and changes in the geopolitical order. For what concerns the economic order, after the stagflation of the 70s, we had 15 years of great moderation until the global financial crisis. And after the global financial crisis, instead of great moderation, we had the secular stagnation, where growth was low and inflation was low because there was a deleveraging. I think that what happened since COVID, and now with trade wars and with geopolitical fragmentation, and that is that we have a return to supply-side economics and a return to negative aggregate supply shocks, while in the period of great moderation and secular stagnation, the drivers of economic activity were more demand-side shocks, positive or negative. I wrote in 2022 a whole book, Mega Threats, talking about the return to secular stagflation, pointing out there are changes in the world economic order that reduce growth and increase inflation. Of course, debt and deficits that eventually crowd out growth, and if monetized, cause inflation. The risk of debasement of fiat currency and return of inflation. Deglobalization and trade restrictions reduce growth and cost, increase the cost of production. through tariff and other trade wars. However, we're also seeing geopolitical fragmentation that also divides further the world and exacerbates the reduction in growth and increasing inflation. Because of that, we've seen now political conflict that had a material effect on energy and commodity prices. The Russia-Ukraine conflict, now the war between US and Israel on one side and Iran, that has led to the kind of oil shocks that we haven't seen since the 70s. I'm old enough to remember 1973 Yom Kippur war between Israel and Arab states, oil embargo in 1979, Islamic Revolution that led to another major oil shock, and the stagflation between 73 and 1982. We've had, unfortunately, global climate change that affects directly and indirectly energy prices, food prices, and so on. We've seen the impact of pandemic reduces growth, disrupts global supply chains, and is stagflationary. And we have, of course, financial crises that also lead to lower economic growth and then financial instability and inflation. And there is now a backlash against liberal democracy and return to populist policies, both in advanced economies and emerging markets, both in democracies and less democratic countries. So all these factors are stagflationary on the economic side. The second one, however, is the change in the technological order. And that one is actually the opposite effect, because it's a massive positive aggregate supply shock that increases potential growth and productivity and reduces the cost of production. So the first arguments I discussed were all stagflationary shocks. The technology instead is just the opposite one. And I would not go into detail of it, but I think that these technological innovations are the most important one in human history, and will be the beginning over time, if we can deal with stagflation, of a secular economic boom. However, there'll be winners and losers, both across countries and within countries, and therefore there'll be tensions. And there are also other consequences of the secular boom, including for financial intermediation. One of these innovations is fintech and financial innovation, and one aspect of it might be the rise of digital assets and digital currencies, whether those are going to be CBDCs or stable coins or tokenized deposits or crypto assets, we don't know. But that creates issues about monetary independence, financial stability, and whether there'll be more dollarization or less dollarization as US is pushing towards stable coins. The third aspect of the change in the world order has to do with the geopolitical one that is characterized by competition, if not rivalry, between US and China. But it's bigger than that. We're moving from a unipolar world to a multipolar one. Jacob was talking about going from G3 to G7 to G20. Now we're back to G2, US and China, or maybe G0, a world that there is no real order. We're moving from multilateralism to unilateralism, from internationalism to realism and real politics, from global cooperation to global competition, if not rivalry, from rule of law to sometimes rule of the jungle, from who is right, who is instead has might, and might makes you right in this world where there are great powers. And we're also moving from a world where there was a global provision of public goods by a number of countries, starting in the United States, to one in which instead now we have a pursuit of a national interest rather than global interest and the provision of global goods. And we see those kind of fragmentation and the lack of an hegemon that provides global public goods, because one hegemon, the US, is becoming tired of providing these global public goods. It felt that on many of these issues, trade, currency, financial stability, and you name it, other countries, starting with China, were free riding. And secondly, we have another power, China, that is rising power, challenging the US, but is seeming to be unwilling or unable to provide some of these global public goods. So in the trade area, we're going towards deglobalization at risk, or fragmentation, and at best we'll have regional agreement. And throughout the world, I would say the tendency is less multilateral cooperation to a situation of unilateralism, or at best of regional cooperation. We have the issue of global imbalances. On one side, the US having exorbitant privilege can run twin fiscal and current account deficit forever. But on the other side, there is China that has been able to produce and do supply side rather than demand side economics. And it knows how to produce, it doesn't know how to consume, and that excess supply is, politely saying, being dumped in global markets. And that creates some of those trade tensions. So those are aspects, again, of both sides not being willing or able to do their own share to reducing these global imbalances. We have the issue, of course, that the US dollar is still the major global reserve currency, and that's a provision of a global public good, but the US has been weaponizing US dollar for national security and foreign policy purposes, trade, finance, sanctions, but there is no even clear alternative to US dollar. Maybe the RMB, maybe the euro, but there are challenges over there. There's an issue of financial stability at the global level, who is providing that global financial stability, and one element of it is provision of global liquidity in situation of crisis, especially for emerging markets. And even there, we're moving to a situation that it looks less multilateral provision of this international liquidity and more regional provision. Europe, with the ESM and other facilities, is helping their own country in the Eurozone or in Central Europe. China, with the Changmei and other initiative and bilateral swap lines, is helping countries in Asia. And the US is going with the ESF, helping their own friends and allies, starting with Argentina. Even the provision of development finance is becoming less multilateral and more regional. China with the BRI, the BRICS Bank, and the IAB. Europe with the provision of variety of structural funds to Central Eastern Europe. And again, United States providing bilateral support to their own friends and allies in the Western Hemisphere, starting with Argentina. There is also the question that other questions are less economic, whether it's global climate change, whether it's health, whether it's global security. There is nobody providing global public goods, not the US, not China anymore, and that's the situation we're finding ourselves in. So what does it lead us? Lead us to a situation in which I think right now we have a process of gradual fragmentation of the monetary system, of the financial system, of the trading system, of the investment system, of the climate, of the health, and of the global security. Looks like a gradual fragmentation and the risk of a real rupture occurring down the line. Once famously, Hemingway said, how do you go bankrupt? And he said, initially, gradually, and then suddenly, and we've seen it in financial crisis. They start slowly and then they occur suddenly. But I would say that the international monetary and financial system is at the same risk. That right now is a gradual fragmentation, but then could occur a sudden rupture. Now, how is going to depend on fragmentation, gradual, as opposed to a rupture? I would say that the key answer to that question depends on the key relationship in the world, that is the US-Chinese relationship. Now, if you think about the US-Chinese relationship, there are three scenarios. One will be of full cooperation, but that's mission impossible. In a world that are competing and they're rival, there is tons of global public goods providing financial, climate change, security, healthcare, you name it, trade, and so on, but they don't agree on how to provide them, and they're all each other, free riding on each other. So full cooperation is impossible. The other extreme, of course, is a disaster. Will be confrontation, containment, and eventually conflict. And that will be war to see this trap emerging, as President Xi Jinping warned Trump just a few days ago in Beijing. And of course, that will be a disaster not only for US and China, but for the world. It will be a world war. It will be the end of our planet. So if full cooperation is impossible, and conflict and containment and confrontation leads to a disaster, the only middle solution is one of competition. A strategic competition that is managed as opposed to unmanageable, of one in which you are de-risking in things that are important to both sides, but you're not fully decoupling. Now, the Chinese don't like to talk about strategic competition. They prefer to talk about strategic stability, but the reality is we live in a world in which, at best, the two sides are going to be in a strategic competition. But if it's managed, it's not going to lead to a disaster, it's not going to lead to decoupling, it's going to lead to some gradual division, some fragmentation, some de-risking stuff that is of geopolitical importance to both sides, say strategic, technological goods of one sort or another, or so. So the good news is maybe out of the last meeting between President Xi Jinping and President Trump, that there is a truce, that there is some movement towards some, how to say, strategic stability, the way the Chinese side put it. But if you look at the details of it, there was no agreement on anything. There was no agreement on trade. There was no agreement on AI and technology. There was no agreement on Iran. There was no agreement on Taiwan. There was no agreement on Russia, Ukraine. So the two sides might be in a temporary truce. There may be movement towards maybe de-emphasizing the tension, but the fundamental divisions and rivalry between US and China remain. And in that situation, the international monetary and financial system is going to be at best one of how to say, regionalization of the provision of those public goods. It's not going to be multilateral any longer. Maybe the best we can find is right now a situation where there is regionalization rather than multilateralism, and we don't escalate the conflict, and we don't destroy the international economic financial institution that led us to peace, prosperity, and progress for the last 8 years. That's the best we can hope for the time being.
Thank you, Nouriel. I think we have a very good overview about the current international financial order and all its shortcomings. Nouriel, before I open the floor to questions and answers, I have a quick follow-up questions about what you said. You know, the second best solution would be maybe more regionalization. Do you think that many countries in Europe, so countries who are not part of the Eurozone, are going to start thinking, is it better for them to join the Euro? Let's take the example of Sweden, let's take the example of Hungary. Is it better for them to be under the new umbrella of the Eurozone versus being by themselves? We talked earlier about global liquidity. In case of a financial crisis today, we don't know if the Fed will come to the rescue and provide liquidity to many countries. So do you see a case or a changing landscape in Europe that some countries were very reluctant to join the Euro might be thinking now more about this? So I take Hungary, for example, where the Prime Minister said that maybe this is the case. Sweden, where there is an ongoing debate. Poland, maybe. What is your view on that?
Well, you know, the countries were in Central Eastern Europe for the time being, with some exceptions, were not part of the Eurozone. Some of them started, and they were skeptical, but I think that gradually many of them are realizing that the condition for joining the Eurozone are being satisfied. So the Bulgarians of the world, and some of them, where there was politics as a constraint, Poland or Hungary have changed in a direction that is somehow more pro-European, and therefore are considering that. You know, think of it this way, you know, in a world where there are major global power, US, China, even rising India, a fragmented Europe or Eurozone is an economic and trading and even geopolitical midget. So Europe, to have leverage on global affairs, first of all, has to integrate more, and a small little country like a Bulgaria or Poland or Hungary has no role in global affairs alone, therefore has to be part of something bigger. And secondly, Europe also has to innovate. That's very fundamental and problematic, because in the past, US was innovating, China was imitating, but now China doesn't imitate but also innovates, and Europe traditionally was always regulating. But in a world in which you are having innovation or imitation, you cannot regulate if you don't innovate or imitate or adopt this new technology. So Europe really has a challenge of competitiveness, of finishing the single market and becoming more competitive and more productive. If it doesn't do so, as I said, how you go bankrupt initially slowly and then suddenly, Europe right now is stagnating. That's not a stable equilibrium, it's an unstable disequilibrium. So the good news is more parts of Europe want to become part of the Eurozone or the European Union. The bad news is that right now, you know, Europe is facing an existential crisis, buffeted by a variety of global shocks and global threats. Used to be Russia, now it's the economic threat from China, now there's the geopolitical threat from the US under Trump, then there is the Middle East that is a source of shocks like energy for Europe, so Europe is being buffeted by stuff. So they have to change, they have to reform, they have to integrate, they have to innovate, otherwise Europe will not survive.
Thank you. We have around 20 minutes for questions and answers. So anyone from the floor who want to ask questions to our panelists? Yes, over there, if you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm from the Sichuan province, engaged in financial market sector as well. We're talking about new challenges, new opportunities in the global finance governance. And for this subset of the session, we're talking about the global monetary system. And my question is like this. At present, according to our observations globally from Bretton Woods or post-Bretton Woods, the global monetary system used to be anchored on the gold and on US dollar. But we have the Triffin dilemma, according to Professor Rubini. In terms of liquidity and financial stability between sovereign currencies and international currencies, there are conflicts and frictions. And also, driven by AI, more and more new tools are being offered, such as tokenized currencies without sovereign constraints, but it requires large language models and electricity, data centers. So under such circumstances, is there the possibility to provide a global alternative with global acceptance so that the international monetary system will find a new anchor like that, which could be compared to the gold or to the US dollar? It could be leveraged by the entire world without sovereign constraints and without being weaponized. Is there an alternative currency or monetary tool or means? Tokens are like electricity and air and water is all around us. In the case of Shanghai Telecom, tokens are being offered as assets with a value attached to it. So my question is, could token be leveraged as the anchor for the future global monetary system? That's my question.
Okay, let me, before we bring your question to the panelists, is there any other questions and answer from the floor? Yes.
Thank you very much, Paweł Kowalewski. And I have a question to Mr. Frenkel. Jakob, you made a very interesting description of a shift in the financial international architecture from the ministries of finance to the central banks. And I like that description of yours saying that the central banks are the only players in the town. And right now, I would like to ask you explicitly about the prospects for cooperation between those central banks, because we know that whenever we talk about international cooperation, it is moving our, how should I say, interest from the internal balance in favor of the external balance. Yes, so internal balance ceases to be a priority at the expense of external balance, which is becoming a target. And with central banks playing a role of what I call Siamese twins, because right now they are not only responsible for monetary policies, but also for fiscal policies. Look at the Bank of Japan, which is in the possession of almost every second bond issued by the government. So with central bank, as I described them, being Siamese twins, do you see any real opportunities for them to cooperate? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions coming? Yes, over there. And one of our panelists needs to go to catch a plane, so thank you very much. We'll be in touch. Please, over there.
Thank you. I'm from China News Service, and I have a question for Nouriel Roubini. And the question is, the International Monetary Fund report has lowered the global growth forecast for this year by 3.1%, mainly due to the impact of the Middle East conflict. What's your opinion about the global growth this year? And how you think about the Middle East war affect the global economy? And the next question is about China's policy. This year, the fifth five-year plan point at an investment and export-driven model to an innovation and consumption-driven strategy. What do you think about this change, and what do you think about China's conditions to boost consumption? That's two questions. Thank you.
Let me take a final question from the floor before going back to our panelists, if there are any other questions. No. Yeah, over there, sorry. If a microphone will come. Oh, we have two. Okay, the two last one. Yes, please.
I
have a question. I graduated from PBC School of Finance. I have a question for Alibaba. Jen, Turkey suffers from a high inflation and limited foreign reserve. Turkey bought a huge volume of gold and has recently sold some of the gold. And Turkey people enjoy pretty good life quality. My question is, how do you have the effective economic governance despite of the headwinds? Can you share with us your experience? Thank you.
Over there.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I come from Indonesia. So my question is about the cross-border supply chain. Because I'm Chinese, we investment in Indonesia. But right now, we face some problem about the currency. Right now, right now, USD to rupiah. Rupiah drop north of. And then we are, so we are 40 Okay, let me continue. So we are 40 investors, so we are concerned about the currency drop too much. But our president say like that. He say because we don't go to shopping overseas, we don't use USD. So don't worry about our currency. But we as a foreign investor, because we should purchase in the raw material, we should pay the foreign power. So this is my question. Is that true? If our Indonesian people don't go to overseas for shopping, so the currency is safe or not? This is my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back now to Jacob. I think there was a question on macroeconomic policy coordination or any other question you want to answer.
Thank you very much. I'll try to address it, but I will also touch on some related matters. The first remark had to do about central banks being the only game in town and how should it be handled. It sounds like a compliment to central banks, but being a central banker myself, I think that central banks should not be very happy from a situation in which they are the only game in town. Because like in an orchestra, you cannot play with only one instrument. So the important point is here that the effort should be done to mobilize other policy instruments in order to join in something which is bigger. Because one of the problems of central banks being the only game in town is that they were drawn to deal with issues that they do not have the tools or ability to deal with, only because they wanted to be helpful. But at the end of the day, the responsibility is for the government as a whole. Let me pick up on a related matter. I think that my take from the morning discussion is that there is nothing like a regional conflict. A regional conflict becomes a global issue very rapidly. So as a result, we should not think that if something happens in one part of the world, it is not interesting to us, because the spillover and the ripple effects are becoming global very rapidly. And here I would like to connect to the question that Governor Kelembitov asked, which is, what should other countries do when you see that there are the giants are fighting with each other? How should another one, the outsiders, play? I think that the answer is resilience. You cannot solve the world problems being an outsider, but you can strengthen your own ability to deal with storms. So therefore, resilience, stability, strong financial system. Most of the crises in the world recently came from the financial system, and we know to have a strong financial system, you need to have lots of capital, low leverage, good supervision, and things of that type. So as a result, I would say that you cannot be just a spectacle and hope for the best. Increase your own resilience. Let me just conclude this by reminding you of a story that an African minister told us many years ago. There is a story in Swahili that says that when elephants fight, the grass suffers. When elephants make love, the grass suffers. Always the grass suffers. I don't think that we should play the game of the grass and be passive. We cannot fight the elephants, but we should increase our resilience by strong fiscal policy, strong financial policy, strong regulatory system. Thank you. I did not speak about China, but I will leave it to the chairman to tell us when to speak about it.
Sure. Ali, please.
Well, I will combine the two subjects which you asked to me and the question which came from the floor. Maybe starting with the multilateral arrangements, like multilateral platforms like G20. Well, since Mark specifically asked about G20, I think the good thing about G20 is it is representative enough, but also it is small enough to have an interactive dialogue. In large tables, in large multilateral institutions, it is very difficult to have a true dialogue mechanism because the numbers just don't allow. People just make statements and leave. But the G20 table is small enough to make an interactive, productive conversation. But what is lacking is, more and more, some countries have been pursuing after their unilateral goals, political goals, and also economic goals. And this has given some kind of damage to it. It's not functioning well now. But before G20, I think what is most urgently needed is a stable, continuing dialogue mechanism between US and China. Because when we look at financial issues, US and China has to talk. When we look at technology, especially things like regulation of AI, US and China should talk. When we talk about geopolitics, whether it happens in this part of the world, whether it happens in another part of the world, it seems that US and China talk. And US and China talking Iran in Beijing means that they have to talk now on many geopolitical issues. So there has to be direct communication lines and stable communication and dialogue mechanisms between these two countries so that other multinational fora can function more efficiently and effectively. Question about Turkey specifically. There are recently more and more issues about the economy, but those issues are not so difficult to fix. Because what happened with Turkey is now we have a very large international production base. Also, Turkey is one of the most connected countries around the world. After US and China, we are number 3 in terms of number of embassies and consul generals around the world. Turkish Airlines is number 1 in the world when it comes to number of countries that they fly, like more than 120 countries now they fly to. And the connectivity of the country and the sheer size of the industry is good enough base to just push forward. But what is needed is more trust. What is needed is a better rule-based management. What is needed is independence of the central bank and also independence of the judicial system. And also we need stronger institutions. So with a better rule-based governance system, with better institutions, I think Turkey will be able to solve these issues very easily. And I have managed two important crises when I was in the government. One of them was our domestic 2001 crisis and 2008-2009 global economic crisis, which we were able to deal with very effectively and very fast because of the potential. But now there is some basic things which has to be fixed. So we need a more predictable fiscal policy by a fiscal rule. We need our central bank independent, and also we just need to do more reforms, structural reforms to rehabilitate the problematic areas. But the thing is, after so many years in government, the current government, which I was once in, is showing some signs of fatigue, and so there is a need for revitalization. So the fatigue era should end, and a revitalization era should start at one point, and then the problems will be solved in a very fast and effective way.
Shi, do you want to add something, Shi?
I think I don't have too much to reply. Just now, a question regarding the token. That's I would say from the monetary economist point of view, I think it's not possible because you know, as a kind of money or currency, you know, should be stable value, and you know, money is not only for, you know, there's a lot of function. So I think that's the reason I think like you know, before we already discussed like the Bitcoin, so it's the same thing. So I think that could be my clear answer. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah. So.
Nouril?
Well, there were three questions that I think are worth considering. The gentleman asked whether there could be a new monetary anchor that is an alternative to the current dominance of the US order. I think you referred to tokens, I guess maybe a reference to cryptocurrencies. On that one, I'll say the following observation. There are new forms of digital money or assets that are just a new digital version of fiat. One is going to be central bank digital currencies. Second one is going to be stable coins. The third one is going to be tokenized deposits that could be used either for cross-border or for domestic transactions. Now, if those things emerge, they'll still be dollar-based, RMB-based, euro-based, and so on. So maybe those are going to give a chance to RMB to be internationalized, to become a larger global reserve currency, in addition to the dollar, but it's not a real radical change. If you instead think of tokens as being really cryptocurrencies, cryptocurrencies starting with Bitcoin are not really currencies. They're not a unit of account, they're not a scalable means of payment, they're not a stable store of value, they're not a single numeraire. So that's not going to be an alternative to the current system. Absolutely not. Calling them currencies is a joke. They are not even currencies. On the IMF forecast for the global economy, their baseline of 3.1% growth and a little bit higher inflation was predicated on not just the ceasefire, but the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz in short order. Today we have a ceasefire, but there is no deal, and Hormuz is still frozen, and 20% of global energy supply is not going to Asia, to Europe, to the rest of the world. So I think we're already creeping away from that baseline scenario to what the IMF referred to as a more adverse scenario, where growth is going to be less than 3.1, below 3%. That's the risk right now. And the IMF had also, in addition to an adverse scenario, a more severe scenario, in which if there is a real spike in all prices, we could end up into a global recession defined as global growth below 2.5%. That's not the baseline, but if there was a return to kinetic war between Israel and US on one side and Iran, because the current unstable disequilibrium of essentially a no deal, ceasefire, but almost frozen, is not stable. Either you go to a deal or you have to go to return to kinetic. If you go return to kinetic, then oil prices could sharply increase if that leads to a destruction of the energy facilities of the Gulf or Iran. So the baseline is already not a baseline anymore. I think we're already moving towards the adverse scenario, and the tail risk of something even worse is rising the longer we are in this unstable disequilibrium. Final thing about China and the 5-year plan. You know, every time that China has a 5-year plan, they talk about increasing, you know, consumption, reducing saving, but the wholesale reform of their own welfare system to lead to people wanting to save less and consume more is never happening. China knows how to produce, knows how to do supply-side economics, how to have new technology in the productive forces and technology of the future, and I think the focus is there. And therefore, there'll be even more increase in supply. China is already 30% of global manufacturing. It's going to become even bigger than that. Doesn't know how to consume. And that's becoming a problem, not just for the US, not just for Europe, but been recently to most of the BRICS countries. You know, whether you go to Brazil, or you go to India, or you go to South Africa, they say, we cannot have a destruction of our manufacturing base because you have cheap Chinese goods that are crowding out our domestic production. I mean, even the eternal friends of Russia, of China, they produce the crappy Ladas, and they say there is an onslaught of Chinese EVs that are destroying our own auto industry. So I think that China is not getting it. It's tone deaf to the fact that being 30% of global manufacturing is not sustainable, and it'll be an onslaught of protectionism, a restriction to trade, unless they change their economic model. But I don't think that the 5-year plan is going to change that economic model. There's still tone deafness in Beijing and across this country.
Thank you, Nouriel. On that note, we are really on time. Let me thank all our speakers for wonderful insight about the topic of the day, which was the reconstruction of the international monetary system that shifted also, but really the global financial order who is facing a major transition. The next session after lunch will be new development and outlook for international trade and investment. And the host will be Guang Tao, the global chief economist of Boki China. On that note, thank you, and let's extend the words to our speakers. Thank you very much.
尊敬的各位来宾，上午大会结束后，工作人员将进行会场清理，请您携带好随身物品。今天下午将要进行的主题论坛有：全球变局下的国际贸易投资重构与展望。 全球资本市场的发展局势 ，AI 驱动数字经济新发展。下午的会议将于1点半准时开始，请您注意时间，按时参会。Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the morning sessions. The staff will now clear the venue. Please take all your belongings with you. The afternoon sessions will be new developments and outlook for.
有这样一所学院。 它诞生于改革开放之初，承担着推动金融变革的使命。它扎根中国大地，锐意打造国内领先、国际一流的金融高等教育院校和金融学术。